Now, lifeadministration.com presents the Life Administration Podcast. Here are your hosts, Leslie Loftus and Ryan Taylor.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Life Administration Podcast, episode number 37.
There you go. See, you got it right now.
Yeah.
I didn't even correct him when he was said in the beginning. I think it's 36. He numbers the episodes. I let him do it.
He numbers the episodes. I let him do it. Well, that felt great.
Yeah.
My name is Ryan Taylor. With me, probably not next week, is
I'm Leslie Loftus, and yeah, he's going to boot me off because I'm being a pest.
Oh my goodness. We covered all of our normal banter stuff, last episode.
This is our second take for today. A lot of times we do 2 or 3 episodes in a day, so I'm wearing the same T-shirt,
And I think just based on the topic today, I think it's really serious.
Yes.
And I think that how do I want to say this? Not enough people take it seriously, obviously, just by
voter
turnout. Right. So we're talking about voting today.
Yep.
We're talking about voting today and what your responsibility is as a citizen of your town, your city, and then lastly, the nation.
Right.
So if you've never voted before, you don't know how to vote, you don't know what it looks like, that's what this episode's about.
You don't know how to do voter registration? We got that. We're going to talk you through it.
We're going to talk you through it because it's actually not... It's not really all that hard. You just have to know what to do.
It's a life administration thing. It's not all that hard once you know how to do it and you've done it once or twice.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, that's easy. And you'll even kind of forget how to tell somebody else how to do it because you'll just automatically do it. If you have never been taught, you're 17, 18, or you're going to be 18 mid-October, right before the election comes up this year, and nobody's ever walked you through how to get a voter registration or how to go vote, how to find your polling place, all of that stuff seems daunting.
Yes.
Which is why we have this podcast to kind of talk through it. After you do it once or twice, it's like, oh, that's easy.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. But it is...
It's life admin.
Yeah, excuse me. It is absolutely... it's a critical thing. I get upset, honestly. No, I here's what I drives me insane. Is I hear people talk about politics and they complain, right? Complain. I don't care what your party is. I don't care what your affiliation is. That is not the scope of this podcast. But I want to make sure that I drive this point home is that you hear people say things and if you ask them the question, well, did you vote? 9 times out of 10, based upon the numbers, they haven't. Right. So I just want to implore you all to take heed here and go vote. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Well, and I'll add another little layer on that too. Part of voting, and we'll get into this a bit, is knowing about the issues and the people and stuff beforehand. And there is far more to vote on. Far more consequential to your daily life than the United States President's office.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that gets most of our news time, most of our focus time, most of our social media time. And really, as a matter of daily consequence to you and your community, it's the least of these.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I remember when we first met and we started talking about these kinds of things, and you use this phrase, and I saw you used it in the show notes as well, as politics is local. Mm-hmm. And it truly is local. So,
and that it really used to be.
Yeah.
All politics was local was something that elder politicians would tell to new politicians about. Don't forget your core constituents. Don't forget your people back home. And I think these days in the news cycle and social media and everything else, it's been really easy to forget that politics is local.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, a politician gets burned on it, but with the death of local journalism, we don't even know the issues in our local area. We're going to get into all of this. Let's go before I start on.
Here we go. Hands it off. Rock and roll. Take it away.
Well, back to politics is local. segment 1, this is all about your state.
Yes.
Okay. All of your voting regulations, all of your where you're going to go vote, how you're going to get your voter registration, et cetera. That's all state. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Texas has slightly different rules than Georgia, that has different rules than California, et cetera. So the first thing you need to do is go find your state government website and your whichever office of that state that covers elections, and go look up what the requirements are.
Yep.
Okay. Now, all of it, some of it's federal in the sense, so like 18, you can vote at 18. Okay.
Woohoo!
So you're a citizen and you're 18. You can vote in your state. Then your state will have different so some of them have different regulations on, say, whether and when ex-felons can vote. So there's a few other little details going on in there. And each of them will have slightly different details about what's required to get a voter registration. For instance, one of the easiest one, you get a voter registration when you get your driver's license.
Yes.
Because it happens to be that your driver's license, at least here in Texas, I'm going to use Texas a lot as an example because it's the one I know the most.
Yep.
You get your provisional driver's license when you're 16, and that lasts for 2 years, 16 to 18. And when you get your real license, our provisional license are printed vertically, and so then you get your horizontal one. That coincides with the age that you're allowed to vote, so the system automatically hooks you up with a voter registration based on the address of your driver's license. Okay? So some states will have something automatic like that. Other ones will have, they do it off the tax rolls because you've got state income tax there. So once you hit 18, now you've got to pay state income tax. Again, go to your state website, look up your state. How do you actually register to vote? And you're going to want to do it. By the way, we're running this episode now we're going to run it sometime in August.
Yeah, probably second week of August.
So a few months before the election, about 3 months before the election, because some of this takes time, especially the first time that you're setting up your voter registration. Actually, your first time setting up your voter registration is usually going to be a little bit faster. When you really need the lead time is if you need to change it.
Yep.
So you've moved states and you need to move because you only get to vote in one space.
Yep.
Right? So if you have moved from Boston down to Houston and you need to switch, that takes a little bit more time to get all of the databases all gelled up so that you can actually vote without your vote being a provisional ballot. We'll get to that in a second. But so go ahead if you need to register for the first time or you need to change because you were moving somewhere. You're now 22, graduating from college, and you're moving from your college town to your place of probable permanent residence. Start that in motion now. Like after we're done with this podcast, go to the website and look at, or maybe if you're sitting at your desk listening to the podcast, look it up while we're talking, and some of this stuff will make a little bit more sense.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Absentee ballots.
Oh, it's down here in the going to vote.
Oh, I skimmed, but I didn't see it. Oh, I'm terrible.
Yep,
I'm terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Never
absentee
mind.
mail-in and absentees.
Yep.
We'll hit it. Don't worry.
I skimmed fast, but I didn't see it. Okay. My bad. Okay. So we talked about needing a lead time if you are in a different area. Any other things that people need to be conscious of when they're going to figure out how to register to vote?
It generally shouldn't be very complicated.
Yeah.
You might be required to present yourself in person to the Department of Motor Vehicles or the Secretary, whatever office in your state controls it. You might need to show up in person to do it. You will probably need some proof of identification and proof of address. So it's the kind of thing you might need to bring your driver's license and, say, your utility bill.
Yeah.
But anything beyond that is unusual. Like, it's not the kind of thing where you need 4 types of identification or an affidavit or a sign. No, it's relatively simple. We need to confirm with a picture ID that you are who you say you are. We need somewhere on there to be an address that says that you are actually living at this address and this is where you can vote.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Simple enough.
Right. Should be. And by the way, never any fees. I mean, this hasn't been a problem for a long time, but there are no fees associated with voter registration.
Right. If you're paying money, it's a scam.
Right. There's no license. There's licensing fees often for driver's license, not for voter registrations.
Yeah. Then you clicked on the wrong link.
Right. Or somebody is scamming you or whatever else. Yes. Yep. Voting, slight administrative difficulty. It's really not that problematic.
Yeah, compared to some of the other things that we've talked about in the past, i.e., taxes,
Right.
insurance, things like that. This is much, much, much simpler.
Much simpler.
Yeah.
Once you know, because it's not like you can just go up into any. It's not like you can just sign up anywhere. Or
Yeah. I can't walk into my local 7-Eleven and be like, hey, I'd like to register to vote.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm buying a lottery card.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'd like a taquito while I'm here. It doesn't work that way.
Correct.
All right. So we're all registered.
Right.
We're going to vote.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about all these different options that we have.
Okay. You have lots of options to vote these days. It used to be that you had to go on actual voting day, which for most federal races is the first Tuesday in November. That's what we all think of as voting day, but we'll talk about alternative voting days in just a minute. So everybody would show up then, lines would be long, all this kind of stuff. But it's also, I personally prefer that because it's community.
I just literally had a conversation about this with some people that I work with in my church, and we were talking about the different ways and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, yo, I like to go.
I'm a voting day of kind of gal.
Yeah, same here.
Unless I'm actually going to be out of the country or something like that. I like to go.
Give me the sticker. I'll put my mask on right now. That's
and I
fine.
like to see the neighbor from 3 neighborhoods over that I don't know because, again, when you're going to vote, it's a very... Well, let's go through the options.
Okay.
And then I'll go back to that. Okay, so day of voting... our preference, but now there are a lot more options.
Yes.
You can do early voting. Again, check with your state. In Texas, I believe we do it the 2 weeks before the full week before. Can't remember. They can run for 2 weeks. They can run for 3 weeks. But anyway, polls will open in your state most likely 1 to 3 weeks before the actual official voting day. And so they will be open, let's say, every Monday through Thursday during 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Also, at least in Texas, early voting typically can be anywhere. So you don't necessarily have to go to your neighborhood polling station like you do on actual voting day. Okay, because different states call it different things. For instance, in Louisiana, they don't have counties, they have parishes, and then, you drill down from there. In Texas, we have counties, then we have precincts. So your precinct is the smallest unit, and that's going to be a certain number of people in a weird geographic, but it's going to be your closest neighbors.
Yes.
Okay, so when you're going on actual voting day, you go and you vote in your precinct. Put a pin in that for a second. You go and vote in your precinct, so you're voting with your actual neighbors. When you're voting on during early voting, you can typically vote anywhere in the city. Now, in Texas, we have, or at least in Houston, we have just changed that so that now even on voting day, you can vote anywhere in the city, and that was a bit of a logistical fun house the last election night that we had. But again, all of these voting rules are highly specific to your locality.
What happened last time, Leslie? What happened when we changed? What could have been? I mean, all we did was change the places, right?
Yes, but now we made it so that every place had the full voter registration. We made it administratively. He's just yanking my chain.
Yeah.
We made it administratively difficult.
We sure did.
And so you just, oh my goodness. And it was,
it was a nightmare.
The Brits who count paper ballots, okay? If you live in the UK and you vote, okay, they actually turn in paper ballots, and then there's baskets, and they're counting actual pieces of paper. Okay, now, granted, they have more experience with it. They were turning stuff in faster than Harris County was getting its numbers the last election night. It was a fiasco. I mean, we're getting up at like 9 a.m. the next day, still checking, still don't have the answer. Still don't have the answer.
Yeah.
Mainly because when you're going into a precinct, okay, well, the precinct has, these are the 500, it's probably more like 500,000.
Right, yeah, whatever.
Right, it's lots,
Yeah.
50,000. These are the 5,000 names in this precinct, and they're crossing off who voted here, and then we turn in those precinct numbers. And also, in your precinct, there are going to be certain city council positions. There might be certain mud districts. Like, your address is tied to what I can vote on here in Memorial area of Houston is different than what Ryan can vote on in suburban Houston. Okay. And by the way, there's a whole lot of areas of suburban Houston. So everybody's got slightly different, yes, we're all voting for pretty much the same national races for president and for senator. After that, U.S. representatives even. There's, 6 or 7 of them here in the Houston area. So the ballots change depending on your address. So they had to get the system to gel all of that. Logistical nightmare.
But more credence to politics is local, not national.
Correct.
Yep.
And we need to focus more on the fact that it's local because there's a lot more consequence going on down
here. And you just really took the words right out of my mouth there. Was if you were to develop a habit of, okay, I sort of know what I stand for. I think I know what the right thing to do is when I go vote. I have a good idea, and you start to develop a habit of spending time researching and developing your understanding. You should find, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that you will, is that most of your time should be looking into your local politics, right? It should be looking into and understanding the issues that are affecting you, because I swear, something that affects me may not affect my neighbor that's 2 streets down because of the way that the line is drawn.
Correct.
Right? And I know for me, like I can take a tennis ball and throw it, and I'm in Harris County.
Yep.
But I live in Fort Bend County. Mm-hmm. And it's a whole different ball game out there, baby.
Complete and totally different ball game.
So spend time understanding like where do you fall, what things really affect you. And then like the national stuff, there's
do it last.
Yeah, do it last.
Honestly, in my news reading in the morning, and I like to read news rather than to listen to news.
Yeah.
But this general rule can apply whatever. When I get up in the morning, first thing I'm doing is going through my little prayer devotional, Anglican Book of Common Prayer, have it on an app. So I do that first thing. Then I make myself, and at first when I was doing this, it was a little harder, and now I don't really have to make myself. Now it's just a habit. I have about 3 local news roundup sources that I use. And I make myself read those first before I ever get to any of the national news summaries.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
And I mean, and I'm not reading, I'm going through the Houston Chronicle's, morning take. And so they've got, the 6 biggest issues facing Houston today. And, I read one of them, but I headline surf on the other 5 or whatever it is. But if you're doing that consistently, you're going to have, it only takes a few months to get a better feel for what's going on in your locality and now I'm also in Houston, and that's a big advantage because there's a lot of people that live in areas that don't really have any local news organization right now. And finding local news sources can be a challenge on its own.
Yeah.
Right. But you want to be an informed voter. Part of voting is being informed. So
you don't want to just
that's
go up
kind
there
of our
and just
unannounced 30-second commercial break.
Yes. Okay, cool. I just want to get that out of the way, man. Local.
So you can do early voting. It's very convenient. You can usually avoid lots of lines. You can vote anywhere. Great, fine. One caution about early voting, though, is sometimes the issues are... We vote in early November. There's a political trope about an October surprise that usually comes in late October. Can't tell you how many times what in retrospect looks like the October surprise has happened halfway into most of the state's early voting. So people who are like, crap, I would have changed my vote if I'd known. Oh, and by the way, this happens even more a lot of times on local stuff because, yes, we're paying a bit of attention now to the presidential race, but nobody's really paying as much attention to their, local city council and mayoral rates and stuff.
Right.
I've worked in local politics. Really, we don't get eyes on an issue until late September, early October is when we really see an uptick in the people that are engaging in local issues. And then they go off and they vote on October 20th when the election is on November 2nd, but the big October surprise that would have changed their mind happened on October 28th. Well, they've already voted.
Yep.
And you can't go back and switch.
Yep.
You can't do that.
Yeah, you can't go and say, oh, excuse me,
Do
sir.
over.
Yeah, now that the rabbit has been pulled out of the hat, I would like to change my vote. That doesn't work.
Right.
That doesn't work. So that's a great word of caution. And For me personally,
Ooh, in primaries, it happened a lot because people ended up early voting in primaries for candidates that by the time their actual primary day came around to their state had dropped out of the race.
Exactly.
So you'd just blown your vote on somebody that wasn't even running anymore.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah. So that just gives credence to what I was going to say. There is definitely a convenience factor in it. And I understand that there are people in situations where this totally makes sense. And I understand it. I get it.
Absolutely.
I get it. With that being said, if you have the opportunity to wait and go and do the thing, be in the line, make sure that you have all of the issues, all the rabbits are out of the hat. The October surprise has been revealed.
Right. You are with your neighbors.
Yep.
You're going to sit down at 7:00 that night when the polls close and hopefully start to see the returns come in. That's my advice. But I've used the convenience of early voting myself too. If I'm traveling somewhere or whatever, sometimes I get it, but aim for.
Yeah. If you can, do. If you can't, still do. Still do. Rather have your early vote than go, I can't make it to the poll.
You know what we say, we don't like the perfect to get in the way of the good.
That's right.
Yes.
Just use that again the other day. I said that to somebody.
I'm glad.
I've stolen it from you. I mean, people think that I say it.
Perfect.
Now.
Well, I stole it from somebody else. I mean, it's not like it's an original idea to me.
Awesome. Okay.
So place of voting, we kind of just did those. Again, see your state requirements. Usually your voting places are going to be very local. There will be a couple of organizations like the League of Women Voters tends to, pretty much everywhere it is, tends to put out candidate packets, candidate summaries, even like drilling down into all the judge races and all the bonds that are going on in your area and stuff like that. They will send questionnaires out to each of the campaigns and each of the sides and any different provision. And they'll have a summary. So check League of Women voter sites. There are a couple of some are local voter knowledge sites. Some are going to be more national ones, whatever. Find a friend that you know of that is very politically involved. They'll know these sites for you to go check in locally. Yep. Your local newspapers, if you have them, will probably have a map or some sort of interactive app on how to find your local polling place. And if they're really good, you can enter your address and they'll tell you, here's your sample ballot. Yep. These are the questions that are going to be on your ballot. So you can go ahead, you can fill one out, can print it off or fill it out or do it on your device. And then you can take that in with you. So you haven't spent just the 5 minutes, looking at the thing but you've thought about it beforehand. Right. You've done the research and now you go in, or you can call up, as a lawyer and somebody who's politically involved, I get this pretty much every election. What do you know about the judges?
Right.
What do you have on a recommendation of the judges? And honestly, I'm not as plugged in as I used to be. So I usually have a few friends that I call up and say, okay, so-and-so and so. So use some of your friends because sometimes it's their area of expertise. And find somebody that you can trust and be like, what do you recommend? Why? Ask questions. Do the research. Look up the little questionnaires on League of Women Voters or any of the other voter information sites that are local to your area. There are lots of resources if you do just a little bit of digging.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say here, and again, sort of just my own experience, but I believe in trusting your gut. I believe in you read, you do your research, you check out what you need to check out. And then there are things that may or may not pass the sniff test, right? And so you ask for friends, find research, trust your gut. What I'm trying to say is like there's not sort of one avenue that you take that you're like that you say this is exactly it's a combination of multiple things, and you kind of put that all together in the ball and you say okay, and all you can do is do what you think is best, right? And it's not, hey man, I've casted some bad votes in my time, right? Straight up. I I wish I could go back and do some things differently. Absolutely. So, but it doesn't matter, man. You're out there, you're doing it, you're getting your voice heard. And then the next time, all it does is prepare you. It kind of goes back to like the cooking thing, right? The more you cook, the better you get at it. The more you vote, the more that you immerse yourself in the issues and you understand the process, you understand the candidates, you understand who the players are, the better you get at it, right? So, and especially if you're starting early, that's even more important, because I didn't really get started until like my early 20s, like probably mid 20s, where I started to like care enough about this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. My 2 cents on that. Okay, so we're at the polls.
Okay, you're at the polls.
I'm at the polls.
Usually, you don't need that much. Here in Texas, we don't even need our voter registration card. All you need is a photo ID that has your name and address. So I am who I say I am, and I live where I say I live. The poll workers will have a record around here. We have a little flippy. Basically, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and you sign so that, yes, I have voted. They give you a special number, and you go to your booth. And then you enter that number so that it makes sure that your ballot specific to your address comes up on the machine, so you vote the right way. But yeah, it's not any more complicated than that. Now, once you go into the voting booth, again, different machines, different states. Ours is a little click wheel here in Texas. I'm sure some are still, when we all, if you're of a certain age, you remember the punch cards from Florida. Basically, these were little old Scantron sheets that you just punched out, and then the computer would read them. So specific to your state, again, so much of that is. Lots of times people will bring their young kids and, so maybe you want to teach your child about civic responsibility and stuff. And so you're bringing them along to vote. If we're talking a child, fine. You can get special dispensation. Let's say you're taking an elderly person in and you actually need to help them because
actually do the process.
Right. And through the process, they might have a poll worker go, or they might have you. Anyway, you can do something. But in general, you go alone. Nobody can follow you to the poll. Nobody can pressure you. You will also notice when you're going to a polling station. So polling stations are often public libraries, schools, community centers, something that's relatively easy for everybody to find and has the space to allow people to line up. And usually the voting machines are kind of bulky and stuff like that. So they need some space, right? And they also need some parking space because people need to be able to park. Anyway, you can usually tell a polling spot because there are just a sea of signs up to about, I think in Texas, it's 100 feet from the polling space. Then there is a little sign that the poll workers put out, at least here in Texas, that says, no propaganda, no poll workers, no campaign worker, or no poll workers, no campaign workers, no flyers, no signs, nothing. So you go through a sea of political signs. Vote for Proposition 4. Yay, Smith. What?
I love that sign. Yay, Smith.
Yes.
No wonder that didn't make it.
I was thinking Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Yeah.
But, so the sea of signs, and then all of a sudden you're done with the sea of signs, and
you're in the fortress of solitude.
And yes, you go to the polling booth alone, and it doesn't matter who you've told, I'm going to vote this way. When you're in there, you can vote the way you want to vote.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not recorded as connected to your, this person voted this way, and the software usually records who voted. And if you voted before, so they can totally tell that you voted in the last, 3 primaries and 4 elections, but can't tell.
That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
Your vote is private.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think if I stuck that piece on this section right there. I don't know. Nope. Okay.
So we talked about the well, how about party line voting?
Party line voting. Okay. So as we all know, there are 2 major parties and a couple of minor parties here in the United States. Straight party line voting is, in some states, you have the option to say, I just want to vote for all Republicans or all Democrats or all Libertarians down the ticket.
Yep.
Okay. So even if there's 20 people running, you click that, and it votes for every Democrat. Let's say you click the Democrats. It votes for every Democrat. And if there's not a Democrat running in that race, it registers a non-vote. Okay? Then you still have, if there's constitutional amendments for your state or bond proposals or school district things, you still have all of those things that you need to go through. But depending on how many people you've got running at any given time, it could save you 40 entries.
Yep.
So people used to do that a lot. In Texas, we just ended that. So now you actually have to go through and you have to check each person. If you skip a race, it's called undervoting. So let's say if you're like, nope, I just don't want to vote for U.S. president this year, and so I'm going to vote, but I do want to vote for Senate and U.S. House and my Texas House and everything else, then you undervoted the office of the president. Okay?
Bold move.
I'm trying to think if there's any other terms that would be useful to know. Primary voting. So, that really isn't other tidbits. But let's kind of get into
go
other
ahead.
tidbits.
That's good.
Okay, so primary voting. First of all,
What is a primary? For those that don't know.
primaries, so the different parties they've got to decide who their candidates are. So it's the voting process that you go through to decide who the candidate is who's going to actually run in the main race. Okay? So first of all, we need to get rid of the notion that voting day only happens on the first Tuesday in November. That is the final federal vote of any given year. And by the way, it happens every 2 years, not every 4 years, just for the office of the president, because you actually elect your U.S. House representative every 2 years. Okay. So it always goes on. But primaries happen back in the spring. You have primaries as early as February, March, April. If you have a runoff, so it's common in a primary race, you have 6 Republicans vying for the spot of Texas Railroad Commissioner, which is anyway.
Great example.
Great example. Thank you. Of course, I choose the oddball office that we have. Anyway, you have 6 Republicans running for Texas Railroad Commissioner, and so it's unlikely that any of them is going to get over 50%.
Right.
So they have a race for the 6 of them. That's sometime early March. The 2 highest vote getters then go into a runoff, which will be sometime in May, June, whenever. And then the person that wins that runoff becomes the candidate that faces the Democratic and the Libertarian candidates. Thank you, for Railroad Commissioner, and that will be voted on in November. But yeah, by the time you've gotten to November, you could have had 3 or so elections.
Yep.
Now, MUD districts, which are municipal utility districts. Okay, so these are separate water, electric, all this kind of stuff. A lot of times, especially out in the West, you are not actually on, say, the city power grid or the county power grid. You're on a special MUD. They can have elections anytime they want, and they like to have them on a Wednesday in March. Or school districts. School districts have bond elections all the time. Give us more money so that we can build more buildings and school more children and all this kind of stuff. They're not bound to have them on any particular day. They will have them on a Saturday in May.
Which is so, I
know. So really, if you're paying attention to voting patterns, if you want to be a dedicated voter, you need to be watching for issues up in your area pretty much all the time.
I was just going to say, it's an all-the-time gig.
December has runoffs. December is full of runoffs. I'm going to say maybe the only month of the year that I've not seen any elections, January.
I was just going to say January.
You get a freebie on January. But after that, February, I can't think of too much that's gone on in February. By March, you're back in primary season. And voting is not every first Tuesday in November kind of thing. It's an all the time. In Houston, our mayoral elections are specifically designed to be off prime year. So they're not even the year of the U.S. House elections. So they're the opposite year from that. So it's not unusual for people to think, oh, well, it's not an election year, and actually we're voting on the Houston mayor.
Yeah. It's always an election year.
Right. It's pretty much that.
Yeah.
It's always an election year.
Yeah.
It's always, and don't think that elections are just in November. And I would love to be able to give you a calendar of when these things kind of go on, but I can only give you the Texas calendar.
Yep.
The Illinois calendar might be just totally different.
Yeah. And
pretty much guaranteed it is.
yeah, and can change. Like, I mean, it's a moving target. Like you said, with the mud districts, with the school districts, I mean, those bad boys can pop up almost any time,
And
basically.
part of that is by design, because they actually, if fewer people vote, then it's only the people
that care.
That well, A, care, or that B, that they know of, and that they've advertised
Right.
the election to, so they can swing it with fewer people.
Right, exactly.
Right. So in some of these mud districts, for instance, there's been millions of dollars issued in bond debt on the vote of like 6 people.
I was just going to say, it was
it's
like 50 people show up and it's like, yep, write them a check.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's just...
blow
It's
your
nuts.
mind.
It
Yeah,
will blow your
it will
mind
blow
once
your
you start
mind.
to get into it.
Yeah.
No, a little bit more about primary elections. So, if you vote in a party primary, it is very common for you to then be limited by other primaries. So, at least, God, I'm saying at least in Texas a lot. So, if I vote in the Republican primary, I cannot go switch over and vote in the runoff in the Democratic primary. First of all, I can't vote in both primaries. I have to choose one. Second of all, I can't switch. If you want to vote in the Libertarian Party system, then you can't vote in either the Democrat or the Republican. You have to sign an affidavit saying that I did not vote in either of those primaries. So the parties can limit who votes in their primaries and require some sort of loyalty there. But let's say I went through and I voted in the Democratic primary all the way up to the top, but then when I get to the end, I want to vote for the Republican or the Libertarian candidate, totally fine.
So be it.
So be it.
Yep.
So be it. But if I started voting in one party's primary, I'm going to have to stick with that party's primary for the rest of the voting, at least here in Texas. I think there are some other states where you can say, okay, I voted in this primary, but now there's a Republican runoff and I want to go vote over there. Sometimes you can switch around.
Okay.
Again, pay attention to your state.
Yep, pay attention to your state, for sure. Wow. I mean, that was a lot.
Yes.
That was a lot. Any other sort of closing thoughts?
Yes. If you really want to learn about some of this stuff, you can volunteer to be a poll worker.
Yes.
Or you can volunteer to be a poll watcher. So a poll worker is somebody who's working for the state or the county and is actually administering the polls. You know, they're checking people in. They're making sure that the polling's all set up, that people get questions answered if they have technical questions about the stuff. They're checking IDs. They're handing out the little stickers that say, I voted, that we all like to show
Yep.
on social media. Okay, that's a poll worker.
That we like to show on social media. That was interesting.
Hey, take your picture. Why not? Poll watchers are volunteers that come through the party that go to the polls to just have eyes. They're not allowed to participate. They're not really allowed to interact with any of the voters. They just kind of sit there and they watch to make, it's basically to keep everybody honest. I have actually volunteered as a poll watcher before. It was loads of fun. This was 20 years ago, and I'm there with the other lady who's the Democratic poll watcher, and I'm the Republican poll watcher. She and I had a great time.
Right.
A great time all day. And, you know, but yeah, so especially if there's areas that maybe it's a new polling site, or maybe there's been some rumors of past shenanigans going on
Some
there.
hanky-panky?
Yes. Some
in an election?
I know, it's shocking.
No.
It's shocking. So parties will send poll watchers to those states to just be there and just make sure
Yep.
that
Allies.
the voters are allowed to vote, that they're not intimidated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can volunteer in either one of those positions, and it's and you can learn a lot from
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything else for this. I mean, I think you covered that brilliantly. You just I basically wound you up and let you go. That was it.
Great.
No, it's good. Oh, no,
I'm just skimming through and seeing if I forgot any of the little bits, but no, I think we got it. As always, if y'all have questions,
Yep.
happy to answer them. But mostly, if it's a detailed question, it's best answered by your state
Yep.
or your state party.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we touched upon early on, but I just want to drive it home when we talked about early voting versus election day voting, that it can really bring a sense of community. Like you can really get to know, those lines can be long.
Yes.
And you can be in there for a while, and
then you're kind of talking. And honestly, it's one of the things people talk about, how we've gotten more contentious. It's one of the things I look back on with some nostalgia, thinking that might have a little bit to do with it, because we don't see each other all the time, even through our disagreements. We're
right. But the one thing that's happening in that, regardless of the party that you're voting in, is that you are using to exercise your voice. And the fact that you even have that in common sometimes, like when you're in that situation, like that already breeds some sort of, right? When everyone leaves,
you already have the big thing in common.
Yeah, you have
the freedom to go into this vote booth and make your opinion known.
Exactly. And it's like when you're there, it's like that's the focus.
Yes.
And when you leave and you go home and like you're rooting for your party, whatever, that's a different sort of vibe,
thing.
right?
Yep.
Right. And so, but the idea of, hey, we're here, this is democracy, it's in action, we're doing what the forefathers wanted us to do, and and this is how we keep this thing alive, and this is how we keep this thing rolling. Right. There's something cool about that, and I think,
and something binding about it. Really,
absolutely. And it's hard to even explain, like, unless you have gone through it, because you're thinking, and it's like, well, what if they're like a Democrat in front of me and I'm a Republican, or vice versa, and then this guy over here is a libertarian. It's like, that doesn't really come
when you're in the line, that doesn't come up so much.
No, it really doesn't. And but it is cool that you're all doing this common thing, which is really, really neat. So
we need more of that.
Yeah, we do need more of that. And it's the focus is on the process and not on the result. Right. Which,
like you said, later you're going to go watch the returns, then you're focusing on the result.
Yeah. But in that moment, it's a different sort of thing, and it does give you some warm and fuzzies, for lack of a better term. So anyway, that's all I got.
All right, I'm done.
Cool. If you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, please be sure and give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment below. That really helps us out more than you know. If you're watching us on YouTube, click that subscribe button, hit the big old thumbs up, like, and share, and subscribe. I am Ryan Talon, and I can be found on Twitter. That's who I am. It was going so well. You
always get flubbed up on the Twitter bit. Usually it's because he's not spelling his name properly. Yeah. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Man. I wish I could cut
love you,
that.
Man.
Yeah, love you. Thanks. At Ryan Talon, RyanTaillon. And oh, by the way, I'm on Twitter.
Yeah. Unenthusiastically, yes. All right. I am Leslie Loftus, and I am usually on Twitter, and I'm Leslie Loftus Text, TX. And I also run the show notes and stuff on the website, and I have lots of useful links on Pinterest.
Very cool.
Life Administration.
Very cool. Yeah, check us out, lifeadministration.com. If you want to dive into the content even deeper, we have curated courses on there, really highlighting specific areas that have been doing really, really well, right. Which is really cool. So I think people have been appreciating that. Other than that, I've been Ryan Talon.
And I've been Leslie Loftus.
And we will see you. No, you've been awesome. You knew I was going to say that. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.